Okay guys, today's lesson is on exponents that are negative or zero. So we're going to talk about what it means to have an exponent that's either zero or a negative number. And I'm going to start off explaining this by showing you some powers of 2. So we'll start with 2 to the 5th power. We all know what 2 to the 5th power is. That's 32. And I'm going to go down and show you all the powers of 2 and see a pattern develop. So 2 to the 4th power would be 16. 2 to the 3rd power is 8. 2 to the 2nd power is 4. 2 to the 1st power is itself 2. So what do you think 2 to the 0 power might be? Most people will say that anything to the 0 power is 0 initially, but it's not. Anything to the 0 power is not 0. What's happening as your power or your exponent decreases each time is you're dividing it by 2, because there's one less 2 being multiplied. When we have, say, a 2 squared, we do 2 times 2, but 2 to the 3rd has an extra times 2 in there. So if we're going backwards and going down the line, we're just taking away one of those times 2. So we're dividing by 2 as we go down the exponent. That's divided by 2. And then we have one less 2 here, so we divide by 2. So when we get down to 2 to the 0 power, it's actually 2 divided by 2, 1. And that's true of any number to the 0 power. I'll show you quickly with an example using 3, but we'll only do 3rd power. So 3 to the 3rd power is 27. 3 to the 2nd power is 9. Again, it's one less 3 being multiplied, so this time we're dividing it by 3. 3 to the 1st power is 3. Same process, we're dividing by 3 as we go down. So 3 to the 0 power, I'm going to take away another times 3, and what happens is 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. Any number, positive, negative, fractions, decimals, any number that is raised to the 0 power is going to be 1. Now let's continue on down and see what a negative exponent might look like. So if we go down one more, this pattern should continue. So I'm dividing by 2 every time I go down by whatever that base is. That's what you're dividing by, because that's the thing you have one less being multiplied. So if we're doing 2's, we take our 2 to the 0 was 1, and we divide it by 2. Well, 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. And we want to write this as a fraction, not a decimal. We're going to use fractions only for this. Doesn't matter what the number is. If we look at 3 to the 0 power over here and go down 1 to 3 to the negative 1, this time we're dividing by 3, I get 1 over 3. So that's kind of a definition of anything to the negative 1 power is actually 1 over that number, because it's 1 divided by that number. So every time you have a negative exponent, it's like dividing by that base one time. If I go down again to negative 2 over here, I'm dividing by 2 yet again. So what's going to happen this time is I'm going to have 1/2 divided by 2, which is actually 1/4. If you forgot how to do that kind of division, 1/2 divided by 2, you multiply by the reciprocal, and it's 1/4. You could also kind of visualize it. If I have half of something, and then I divide that into 2 equal pieces, I have 1/4 of it. So why then is it 1/4? Well, it's because we are dividing by 2 twice from 1. So for you to have a rule for all numbers, what's happening is if we kind of use 2 to the 0 as our starting point, we're dividing by 2 twice, which is the same as dividing by 2 squared, is essentially what we're doing. Dividing by 2 times is like dividing by 2 squared. If I come over here to this 3 example, I'm dividing by another 3. That's like taking 1, because if we're kind of jumping from 3 to the 0, which is equal to 1, I'm taking 1 and I'm dividing it by 3 twice. So that's like dividing it by 3 squared. And we could keep going with this same pattern. If I go down one more here, to 2 to the negative third power. That's like 1 divided by 2 3 times, so it's the same as 1 divided by 2 to the third, which is 1 over 8, but we're going to write them as in exponential form because it's easier to visualize. Over here, if I go down one more, I'm dividing by another 3. That makes it 1 over 3 to the third. So basically, a negative exponent means division of that number, so it becomes the denominator of a fraction. So, to do a couple examples real quick, if you have any number, we'll use x to represent a number, raised to the negative fifth power, what that means is 1 divided by, or 1 over, x to the fifth. It's like dividing by x 5 times, which can be written as 1 over x to the fifth. So if I have 5 to the negative 7th power, that's the same as 1 over 5 to the 7th. These two are equal to each other. So sometimes you'll need to take a number that has a negative exponent and convert it to a fraction with only positive exponents. Sometimes you'll have to go the other way. So sometimes you might be given something like 1 over 4 to the 5th power, and you'll be asked to write it using a negative exponent. You need to know that 1 over 4 to the 5th power is the same as 4 to the negative 5th power. Now sometimes we have other numbers besides 1 in there. So for instance, if we had 6 over x to the negative third, well, that's 6 over x to the negative third. We could actually think of this as 6 times 1 over x to the third. That means the same thing, negative third. Sorry, I forgot the negative. And what that basically means, when you see a negative number, if it's already on the bottom or in the denominator of a fraction, what that means is it needs to be moved up to the top. So it's actually kind of the reciprocal. So just like before, what we did with a negative exponent is we made this its reciprocal. Well, if it's already on the bottom, we still make it its reciprocal, which means we flip it. So if we have a 1 over a negative x to the negative third power, we would actually change that to x to the positive third over 1, but we don't have to write over 1. So in this example, it's sort of like the negative exponent causes it to move positions in the fraction. If it's on the bottom, it'll move up. If it's already on the top, it'll move down. That's kind of what a negative exponent means. So that's a quick overview of what negative exponents and what 0 as an exponent means.